Alrighty, so before we flick the cameras on and start looking at any serious light painting techniques, I thought it would be wonderful to show you a little bit about the history of light painting, but also a whole lot of different light painting techniques before we get into it. So this information around the history of light painting comes from and can be found at Jason Page's incredible website, lightpaintingphotography.com. He's got an incredible history section there where you can look through, and it's regularly updated on the history of light painting right back to the very beginning. And I think when we think about the early days of light painting, all right, so I'm going to get this wrong because I don't speak French, but Etienne Jules Marie and Georges Denis in 1889. Now, 1889 was right back at the early stages of photography, and what these people did, and you'll see this quite a bit in the early stages of light painting, they would attach lights to things. So they would attach lights to people or to objects in order to track their movement. So they were putting lights on people and getting them to move, jump over things. There was Frank Gilbreth was attaching lights to humans, and they would sit there and they would do what's called a time and motion study. So they would be moving things around, say in a factory, as they put things together, and the way they would calculate the fastest, most efficient way to do that was attach lights to them and get them to do the thing. So there was quite a bit of that. Really things started to get, there were a few other people, I'm just touching on some of the ones that I know about and I enjoy talking about. Things started to get pretty serious. There was a guy, Jan Milly, now I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, but Jan Milly did his own light painting, so he was using a technique called photo flash, amongst other techniques. But some of the early light paintings that get the most attention were done by Pablo Picasso and Henri Matisse. Now, it's really interesting. I would see these early photographs that Pablo Picasso and Matisse would do, and I thought, they were doing light painting. But what it actually was is Jan Milly was a photographer for a magazine, and they would send him out to photograph or interview people like Picasso and Matisse, and he would introduce them to light painting. And some of the early images of Picasso light painting, unmistakably Picasso, but with light. And when you see them, they're quite technical photos because you see the light painting, but Picasso is frozen in the scene. So the light sources come from somewhere to illuminate him. They're absolutely fascinating. You'll see a whole lot of other artists through this page on lightpainting.com. So I have a particular like for Eric Stoller's work. He's considered the father of modern light painting. And the reason that I love his work is because he was taking it outside. When you look at his work of taking sparklers down a street and around it, you can see the environment that he's in, which is a form of light painting that I'm particularly fond of, as you'll see. So when you look at these early forms of light painting, there's a lot of variety there. When we go right from the early days of using it as a functional, almost engineering tool, right through to the modern forms of light painting. Yeah, you can pretty much take any form of light painting there is today and funnel them back down to those early times. Light painting came to me in 2009, and I thought in 2009 that we were really pushing and that it was this, for me, it was this amazing new thing. And it wasn't until Jason Page kind of made me aware that there was this, beautiful work through time, and even up to people like Vicky De Silva in the 80s. Our art form has this amazing history. So I would really encourage you to go and spend some time over on Jason's page, on Jason Page's history page, and check it out. It's a huge amount of fun. And you'll realize that what you're about to undertake in this beautiful art form that we have has really beautiful, deep roots in photography. So we've had a bit of a look at the history of light painting. So there's all these different techniques in there, but let's have a look at the fundamental techniques that exist in light painting. And I really think you can boil them down to these three basic methods. So the first one is moving a light source through the frame. So if we think of this frame as a 4x3 or a 19x20, we're going to create something inside of that frame. And the very first technique is moving a light source through the frame. So here's a light painting tool, and if it was dark and we had all the settings right, I'm going to move that through and we're going to have a light painting. Now the light painting is created by the color that we put into it, the shape that we put into it, the texture that we put into it. You can think of it almost as like normal painting. So light painting, we're creating texture and shape. As you would with a normal painting, you grab a different brush. It might be a fat brush or a thin brush or a coarse brush or a fine brush. The materials that you're using are stuff like either oils or watercolors, or there's a million different techniques and methods and styles that you can create a painting. Well, it's exactly the same with light painting. And through these tutorials, this particular technique, which is moving an object through the frame, I'm going to teach you a whole lot of different ways that we can add texture, make color and shape and texture inside of those frames. So that's the first real technique. The next technique, which is basically like light painting, is looking at a scene. So the camera can't see the tool, and we have an object. So this might be our object here, which is the camera, but we're going to be doing this with all sorts of things: trees, houses, this giant poster behind us. But basically, the next technique is actually painting an object with light. So we have a light source like I have here, and the camera might be what we're lighting, and we light the camera. So the camera is illuminated and shows up in the image. We might have a torch and we might light up a tree, or we might be doing a light painting portrait and using the light to illuminate our subject. So that's another main technique, and the big difference between the two is that with the first technique, the camera sees the light painting tool. The second one, generally, the light painting tool is not seen in the image. So the third technique, the third fundamental technique, there's always going to be other things that I miss or that exist, is, and Jason Page, again on his light painting photography page, may or may not have coined this, but he calls it kinetic light painting. And what kinetic light painting is where the camera is moving. So we may have an object that remains still, that is illuminated, and using something like this, which is the camera rotation tool, and we'll be doing a whole tutorial on camera rotation, and what we're doing is the object stays still, it's illuminated or has color, and we are moving the camera. So we're either rotating it or we're moving the camera through the frame. Now, although we're not actually moving the light painting tool or whatever, we are still creating movement of light through the frame. So those are the three basic techniques of light painting, and if you take all of those and you mix them up using different tools and different opportunities, you create all of the images that we're going to be creating. Brilliant. So those are the main techniques. Let's move on. Peace. I hope you enjoyed this visit to the School of Light. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. I'll be adding videos all the time. Head over to the Light Painting Tool Shop at the website. There's a huge array of tools I've made there for you to take on your light painting journey. Peace.